Freezing pipes to create a plug so you can then work downstream without having to turn off any valves or drain the system is a pretty standard job for most plumbers. But then again, they do have the expensive equipment to be able to do it. But for us DIYers, you can buy pipe freezing kits that work off of aerosols. So I'm going to ask the question, does it work? And if it does work, how reliable is it? Today, we're going to find out. Firstly, why would you ever want to freeze a pipe? Just turn the valve off and isolate the system, I hear people ask. Well, that's fine, as long as the valve is still working. Over time, valves tend to get corroded and then they finally get stuck. And in that situation, you physically can't turn the water off. And that's a good example where freezing the pipe just before the valve and replacing the valve comes in really, really handy. But plumbers themselves, because they freeze pipes so often and they're more confident in doing it, they tend to freeze pipes even when they can turn the water off. For instance, if they're working on a radiator in a bedroom, they can freeze the incoming and outgoing pipes, take the radiator off and work on that while the rest of the house has still got central heating. So it's one of those processes that if you're confident in doing it and you know how to do it, suddenly you can think of more occasions where it's easier to freeze a pipe than maybe drain down the whole house and drain down the system. Plumbers use electrical equipment to freeze pipes, which works really well, but are hugely expensive. So these DIY aerosol kits are really our only alternative. This one I got from B&Q, but they sell the same thing on Amazon. I'll stick a link in the description below. And it comes with an aerosol that's got enough liquid in it, apparently, to freeze two 15mm pipes. And a couple of jackets there that we'll have a look at in a minute. Now I have to say, before I go any further, I've never done this before. Probably because I've never been confident enough to be able to freeze a pipe and think it's going to stay in position while I do the work and not get completely flooded in the house. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. So today it'll be a really good test to see if this works, and we're all learning together. Now, the first thing I have to say is that freezing a pipe doesn't necessarily mean it's going to split. So this is a little rig that I've set up for today's trial. If we freeze a portion of pipe, as that water expands and turns into ice, it wants to expand radially, but that's not enough to make the pipe split. Because it can't expand radially, it then tends to travel down the pipe, which isn't a problem until the whole pipe is frozen, the water has nowhere to go, the pressure builds up, and then it starts really working on the joints at the end, anything that isn't perfect. And in an older system, at some point, you'll find something fails, and that's when you have the flood. But if we're just going to freeze the section and create a plug, because it's got somewhere to expand in either direction, that's not going to be enough pressure to split that pipe. So there's no risk that we're suddenly going to get a failure because of splitting, because it's such a local area. Right, let's get on and fit some of this jacket and that, and then see if we can freeze this pipe. This kit cost me £33 and comes with 2 jackets and the refrigerant. However, if you already have the jackets, then the aerosol on its own you can find for somewhere between 15 and 20. So not cheap, but also not such a huge investment, especially if it gets you out of trouble. It's easy to fit in place with the jacket just wrapping around the pipe, which then clips to itself. And then for an added seal, the ends are closed tighter with one of the supplied zip ties just to keep the refrigerant liquid within the jacket. So just before we start the freezing, I'll just explain what we've got here. This is the incoming pipe under mains pressure. You can see that because... So just tighten that up. One of the requirements for freezing, whatever kit you're using, is that you don't have flowing water through it, because as you're trying to freeze an area, if you've got flowing water, it's just going to take away that cold area and you'll never ever freeze. Obviously, also important if you're working on your central heating that it's not on. The last thing you want is warm pipes, because you'll probably never ever get to the point where it freezes. This is the area that I want to be working on, which is a couple of 100mm away from the frozen section, and obviously the valve that you've just seen. So the idea is, with this aerosol, is that we've got a little bit of a tube here that we put in the end. And as I said, this is a 2-use system. So if you want to be really accurate, I'd weigh that and make sure you only use half of it in the first one. Then you've got another half to use. And all we do is this little thin nozzle, we poke into 2 little holes on the top of the jacket there. And the idea is that we keep squirting this in bit by bit. If we see any liquid coming out, then we just hold off, because the liquid soon goes to vapour, and then we can squirt some more in. Then once we're finished and use half the can, we'll leave it for 10 minutes. That should then form the ice block, and then we can work on our pipe. So let's stick this in and see if we can get going. There's not very much happening. I can hear it going in, a bit like an aerosol. I'm trying to sort of spread it around a little bit. I don't know if that's what I'm supposed to do. And you can sort of see a little bit of frost. Must be almost down to about a half, so that's near enough my lot. That is just about there. It's really very cold on the outside of the jacket. So just to show you what this liquid is, I'm just going to spray a little bit on here. It comes out as liquid, very quickly sort of evaporates. It's pretty blooming cold, but apparently it's supposed to be environmentally friendly, so there you go. You're allowed to use it without anyone getting upset. Right, so that's been about 2 minutes since I've sprayed it all in, and it says we have to wait 10 minutes. So let's leave it another 8 and see if it works. So that is 10 minutes up since we put all the liquid in. I must say, it is really cold, and if I actually touch the pipes either side, it is really freezing cold. I don't know what is in that liquid, but it does make things very, very cold. So let's try the ultimate test, which is opening this valve and seeing if anything comes out, shall we? That is looking pretty good. Okay, so that valve is now fully open with full standard household pressure on. So that plug is definitely working. So just to sort of complete this scenario, I'm going to pretend that I've got some sort of damage here, cut the pipe, do a bit of a repair, and then we'll see how long that lasts until it lets water through. If this works as planned, I could easily see myself in the future using pipe freezing to work on the central heating system without having to drain the whole system, refill it all again, and then add in central heating inhibitor, which costs as much as the pipe freezing in the first place, and then having to go round and bleed every radiator. So actually, cost-wise, there's not much in it, and time-wise, this works out a lot quicker. So that's my makeshift repair complete, although it didn't take very long. I'm going to keep the valve open because what I want to see is how long that ice plug stays in place without me touching it and holding back the mains pressure water before it starts releasing water through, because really that length of time is the same length of time that you've got to work on the system before you get flooded. So now it's exactly 30 minutes since I started working on the pipe, or 40 minutes since I was injecting the sleeve there, and so far, still holding. 4.5. Whoa, that went a lot quicker than I thought. I was sort of thinking it would start dribbling and then sort of rush through, but obviously the plug went and suddenly that's it. So when your time is up, you definitely know about it, especially if you're still working. So it's 55 minutes since I finished putting the coolant in, and 45 minutes since I started working on it. Now, I'm aware that this workshop is quite cool, so I think that's why I've got so much time out of it. In the literature it says half an hour. I got 45 minutes. I'm sure if you're doing it in a warm bedroom in the middle of summer, maybe you get less than that as well. So pretty impressed with that. I love it when things just do what it says on the tin. Why is that? Well, because half the time these days it doesn't. The only thing I would say is if I was using this in my house, I would be inclined to make sure I've got plenty of this next to me, because if things don't go to plan and they take too long, or you get the feeling that things are starting to melt, then at least you can inject some more and keep it going. If you run out of this, then you could be in trouble. The other thing I was surprised about, how quickly that plug went. I thought it was going to start dribbling and then come out, but no, once it went, it went. And if you're not finished at that point, you've got big problems. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you next time.